A 13-year-old boy walked into a freezing cave 30,000 years ago. He carried a burning torch. He went alone. He crawled hundreds of meters into total darkness. Then he pressed his hand against a wall, and you can still see it today. He wasn't sent there. He wasn't being punished. He went because that's what teenagers did. For 300,000 years before you were born, there was no such thing as a teenager. The word didn't exist. The concept didn't exist. The decade-long waiting room you spent your adolescence inside hadn't been invented. For 99% of human history, the creature we now call a teen was doing something else entirely with their days. And what they were doing changes how we understand what humans actually are. Go back, not medieval Europe, not ancient Rome. Further. Before writing, before farming, before cities. 100,000 years ago, 200,000, you're inside a cave in what will one day be called France. The fire is low. A boy of 13 wakes up next to his mother. He doesn't think of himself as a teenager. He doesn't think of himself as a child either. He thinks of himself as someone with work to do. Here is his day. At dawn, he eats what's left from yesterday's kill. Dried meat, roasted tubers, no table. He eats standing, talking to the men who will leave to hunt. He's been going on these hunts since he was 9. He's not at the front of the line. He carries the spare spears. He watches. He learns. And he is not good at this yet. In 1989, anthropologist Ryutaro Ohtsuka studied the Gidra people of Papua New Guinea. He found that men between 35 and 45 had 4 times the hunting success rate of teenagers. The teens were faster, stronger, physically peaking. But hunting isn't about strength. It's about reading the dirt, knowing which way a wounded animal will run. Recognizing patterns the boy hasn't lived long enough to absorb. He is the apprentice generation. He won't be a great hunter for 20 more years, and he knows it. His body, though, is doing exactly what your body did at his age. In 2024, a team led by bioarchaeologist Mary Lewis at the University of Reading examined the skeletons of 13 adolescents who died in Europe between 10,000 and 30,000 years ago. By analyzing bone fusion in the wrist, the pelvis, the canine teeth, they reconstructed when these ancient teens hit puberty. The answer was 13 and a half, almost identical to modern teens. But full adulthood came between 17 and 22, 5 years, not a decade. The same biological clock as yours on a completely different schedule. The hunt is over. The animal has been carried back. Everyone has eaten. And here is what shocks modern researchers more than anything else. By early afternoon, he is free. The Aka of the Congo, the Hadza of Tanzania, the hoansi of the Kalahari, hunter-gatherers still living something close to the original human lifestyle, spend 15 to 20 hours a week on survival tasks. For teens, the number is lower. The productive part of the boy's day ends before yours has started. He has the rest of the daylight to do whatever he wants. And what he does is something we have lost. He goes into the dark. Walk through any prehistoric cave system in Europe, Chauvet in France, Lascaux, El Castillos in Spain, 40,000 years old. The walls are covered in painted handprints, animals, abstract symbols. For decades, scholars assumed adults made all of it. In 2005, zoologist R. Dale Guthrie published The Nature of Paleolithic Art. He had measured thousands of handprints and finger flutings across European caves. His conclusion was that adolescent boys left a huge proportion of them. A 2022 study by University of Cantabria archaeologist Verónica Fernández-Navarro confirmed it. Up to 25% of the hand stencils belong to hands too small for fully grown adults. Think about what that actually means. The boy from this morning, or someone exactly like him, took a torch of burning pine and crawled hundreds of meters into a freezing, pitch-black cave system alone. He found a wall. He pressed his hand against it. He took a hollow bone, filled his mouth with ochre and water, and blew the pigment around his hand until the negative of it was fixed on the rock. Then he climbed back out. Nobody told him to. He did it because he wanted the world to know he had been there. 20,000 years later, you can still see his hand. This is what teenagers do when nobody is watching. They don't waste their freedom. They risk something with it. Anthropologist Barry Hewlett has spent his career studying the Aka and Chabu hunter-gatherers. He documented something modern parents would find impossible to imagine. Hunter-gatherer teens travel. They leave their camps for weeks, sometimes months. They look for mates. They explore. They move between groups. They bring back new tool designs, new techniques. In hunter-gatherer societies, adolescents are the single largest source of innovation. They are the cultural engine. They are how the group moves forward. They are not a problem to be managed. They are how the species survives. And then one day, the childhood ended. Among the Tiwi of northern Australia, when a boy turned about 14, his cousins arrived at his family's camp painted like warriors and carried him off while his mother pretended to resist. The initiation could last years. Aboriginal boys in Central Australia went on walkabout, a solo journey through wilderness that could last 6 months. Among the Ona of Tierra del Fuego, adolescents were taken from their families, made to fast, made to endure cold and pain and isolation. The point of all of these was the same. You went in as a child. You came out as an adult. There was no waiting room. There was no decade in between. The bridge was burned the moment you crossed it. Then, 10,000 years ago, agriculture arrived. Then, cities. Then, schools. In 1904, for an American psychologist named G. Stanley Hall published a book called Adolescence, and for the first time, someone defined the years between 13 and 20 as a separate stage of life. He called it a time of storm and stress. The word teenager wouldn't appear in print until 1941 in Popular Science magazine. Within 60 years of Hall's book, every industrialized nation on Earth had built an entire institution around managing a creature that didn't exist for 99% of human history. Here's the thing nobody says out loud. The teenage years you remember, the waiting, the boredom, the feeling that they would never end, they wouldn't have existed at any other point in human history. We invented them. We took the 5-year window the boy lived inside and stretched it into a decade. We took creatures built for hunting, exploring, mating, and creating, and we put them in chairs for 8 hours a day. We told them their work doesn't matter yet. We told them their decisions don't count yet. We told them their real life starts later. Rates of teenage depression, anxiety, and suicide in industrialized countries are now higher than at any point on record. Some researchers think this isn't a coincidence. It's what happens when you take an animal built for 30,000 years of cave painting and long-distance wandering and meaningful early work and force it into a holding pattern for the most physically alive decade of its life. Ancient teens weren't happier because their lives were easier. They weren't easier. They were dangerous, often brutal, sometimes short, but they were real. The hunt mattered. The art mattered. The journeys mattered. The hand pressed against the cave wall is still there. Yours probably won't be. You spent your teenage years memorizing facts you've already forgotten. They spent theirs leaving handprints that outlived civilizations. The boy never thought of himself as a teenager. He never sat in a classroom. He never waited for his real life to start. By the age you are now, he had hunted, traveled, made art that would survive longer than any nation that ever existed, and crossed from child to adult on a single afternoon. We didn't extend childhood. We invented a new stage of life and called it normal. And the strangest part is that the creature we put inside it is still, in his bones, the same restless animal that walked into the dark with a torch 30,000 years ago to leave his mark on a wall. We just stopped giving him a wall.